Hi there, welcome back. In the last video, I showed how St. Thomas Aquinas clearly taught that it is very, very possible that we can come to know God. In fact, he proved that God is extremely knowable. And he goes on in the first part of the Summa with some more interesting questions having to do with our knowledge of God. And I titled this one, Do Some See God More Perfectly Than Others in Heaven? That's the first article we're going to talk about because I find it interesting. I think a lot of us just think everybody gets to heaven, everybody's the same. But Thomas doesn't seem to think that that will be the case. And it definitely has to do with how we live our lives now before we die as to which level or which, degree of perfection we're going to have when and if we do get to heaven. Now, of course, this all has to do with epistemology. It has to do with coming to know something, and God is supremely knowable, as I mentioned. So we know people. We come to know things like creatures and snakes and refrigerators and this is common sense, right? We all know this, but the way we know it is very different than how a animal like a dog or a cat or a sheep would come to know something. We're higher level of intelligence. We're rational creatures, and so this is a real privilege that we have to be able to come to know things. And it also, complex things that no other visible creature, the angels, of course, can understand these kind of things, but no other creature can understand algebraic formulas. And so this is a great dignity we have, but we also can come to know God. But again, is the degree of perfection in heaven going to be exactly the same for each one of us? And if not, what is going to be the distinction? Well, this is something that St. Thomas Aquinas was very concerned about, and I think it's something that we should be concerned about as well, because, like I said, it has to do with how we live our lives now before we get there. In fact, that's going to be the determining factor. All right, so he goes on and he says that of those who see the essence of God, one sees him more perfectly than another. This indeed does not take place as if one had a more perfect similitude of God than another, since that vision will not spring from any similitude, which means anything visible. It's not like, our vision where one of us has a better pair of glasses on, or we can just see something more clearly because, the object that we're seeing is more clear. Clearly, God it's not like that. It's an intellectual knowledge that Thomas is talking about. But it will take place because one intellect will have a greater power or faculty to see God than another. The faculty of seeing God, however, does not belong to the created intellect naturally, but is given to it by the light of glory, which establishes the intellect in a kind of deiformity, to be like God. So now the big $64,000 question is, well, what makes the difference? How do we have a greater light of glory, a greater degree of deiformity than another person? And Thomas goes on, sixth article of the 12th question, the Summa. Hence, the intellect, which has a more of a light of glory, will see God the more perfectly, and he will have a fuller participation of the light of glory who has more charity. So the one who loves more, right? Because where there is the greater charity, there is more desire. And desire in a certain degree makes the one desiring apt and prepared to receive the object desired. Hence, he who possesses the more charity will see God the more perfectly and will be the more beatified. Now, charity is an infused theological virtue, right? So we can't really work hard at getting it, but we can certainly pray for greater charity. But we, to some degree, can desire God more, right? It's a matter, how well do you desire it? Do you pray for greater desire? Do you think about God? Do you pray to God? Do you seek God? Do you look for God, right? If you had a burning desire to get, a certain kind of food or go to a certain kind of restaurant or take a trip to, New York City, well, you would find a way to get there if you had the desire. And our world is filled with, an emphasis on desire and pushing ourselves to achieve great things. And how bad do we want to win that championship or run that marathon or motivate ourselves to, get the raise at our job, or what have you. There's always we're a very driven people, but are we driven to know God? Are we driven to have a greater degree of deiformity? It all has to do with desire, which is connected to charity, and so I think there is something there. There's a lesson there. Thomas goes on in the next article to talk about those who are in heaven. Do they comprehend God? Do they see him fully? And he says, it is impossible for any created intellect to comprehend God, yet for the mind to attain to God in some degree is great beatitude, according to Augustine, right? So we can see God to some degree, but we can't comprehend him, because in proof of this, we must consider that what is comprehended is perfectly known, and that is perfectly known which is known so far as it can be known, but no created intellect can attain to that perfect mode of the knowledge of the divine intellect, wherefore it is intrinsically capable. Everything is knowable according to its actuality, but God, whose being is infinite, is infinitely knowable. Now no created intellect can know God infinitely, for the created intellect knows the divine essence more or less perfectly in proportion as it receives a greater or lesser light of glory. Since therefore the created light of glory received into any created intellect cannot be infinite, it is clearly impossible for any created intellect to know God in an infinite degree, because if we comprehended God, we would know everything that God knows, everything about him, and that would instantly make us God. And there can't be two gods, and so we can get close, I guess. We can know God pretty well, but we cannot entirely comprehend him. Okay, this is interesting. Whether those who see the essence of God see all they see in it at the same time. Now, if I were to say, think about your favorite state in the United States, okay? Just, Texas or California or Florida or what have you, right? And that's fine. If I were to say, think about all of them at the same time, okay? You would say, wow, that's confusing, because I can't do it, right? I can think about Wyoming or Nevada, but it's hard for me to think about all of them at the same time, or all the capitals, or, think of a math formula and another math formula exactly the same time. Our minds don't work that way, right? But what he says is what is seen in the Word is seen not successively, but at the same time. In proof whereof, we ourselves cannot know many things all at once, for as much as understand many things by means of many ideas. But our intellect cannot be actually informed by many diverse ideas at the same time, so as to understand by them, as one body cannot bear different shapes simultaneously. Hence, when many things can be understood by one idea, they are understood at the same time, as the parts of a whole are understood successively, and not all at the same time. All right, so our minds, our way of knowing, our epistemology will be different in heaven. We will be, in a sense, angelic in regard to our minds. We won't be angels, but our minds will become angelic, and angels have infused intelligible species, the way they're created, right? They're not discursive. They don't learn one thing at a time. Our minds are going to be different. Here's an example of it. If I said, think of shutters on a house, and a door in a house, and the front yard of a house, and the roof of a house, and the chimney of a house, right? These are all individual things, but we can also conceive of a house that has all these things, right? Well, it doesn't have a chimney, but it has most of these things, right? So we think of a house which is really composed of a lot of different things, and so that's about as close as we can come, where there's something that's compound or complex, has a lot of different parts, and we can think about it as a whole. But in heaven, our minds will become that way, where we can think of all things basically at the same time. And that is pretty interesting, okay? Can anyone in this life see the essence of God? Thomas says, God cannot be seen in his essence by a mere human being, except he be separated from this mortal life. The reason is because the mode of knowledge follows the mode of the nature of the knower, but our soul, as long as we live in this life, has its being in corporeal matter. We see physical things. Hence, naturally, it knows only what has a form in matter, or what can be known by such a form. Now, it is evident that the divine essence cannot be known through the nature of material things. Therefore, we cannot come to know God in his essence now, but we will be able to a great degree, when and if we get to heaven. And this should be very exciting for us. We should look forward to it. And as I said before, we should seek to desire and to love God as much as possible here on earth so as to have the greatest degree of deiformity when and if we get there one day in beatitude. God bless you. Thanks for watching.